Moon Hwae-he's return to Korea.
This segment explores how IR strains developed at the International Rice Research Institute were adapted for South Korean agriculture, the challenges faced in this process, and the broader implications for South Korea's agricultural transformation. In 1966, Moon Hwae-ho returned to South Korea. He initially wished to continue his research at the IRRI as a regular staff member. However, at the request of Seoul National University, he had to return. Bringing with him over 500 rice strains developed at IRRI, he and his students began conducting experiments at the Rural Development Administration in Suwon. At the time, Suwon housed various agricultural research facilities that dated back to the colonial period, as well as the College of Agriculture at Seoul National University. Ho and his students conducted a series of experiments to test and identify IR-derived strains that could adapt to Korea's climate. However, Ho's colleagues were largely uncooperative. There was a widespread skepticism regarding the usefulness of researching indica strains in Korea, where only Japonica rice had traditionally been cultivated and consumed. In addition, when Ho came back to South Korea, all available resources at the RDA were being concentrated on the failed attempt to commercialize Hinong rice, as previously mentioned. By 1968, the prospects of the IR strains remained highly uncertain.
Moon Hwae-ho persuading Kim In-hwan.
In 1968, following the failure of Hinong's commercialization and the dismissal of Lee Tae-hyun from his position, Moon Hwae-ho saw an opportunity to actively promote the IR strains he had developed. The newly appointed head of the RDA was Kim In-hwan, an agricultural economist. Ho, understanding the pressures Kim faced after the failure of Hinong, approached him to introduce the IR strains as a potential successor to the failed project. He emphasized that these varieties had the potential to spearhead a new green revolution in Korea. Initially, Kim In-hwan, like most of his colleagues, was hesitant about committing to indica rice varieties. However, Ho persistently advocated for their adoption, emphasizing the credibility of IRRI as an internationally recognized research institute. His argument gradually persuaded Kim. Seizing this opportunity, Moon Hwae-ho successfully arranged for the IRRI director and senior officials to visit South Korea, where he facilitated a meeting between them and Kim In-hwan. Following this meeting, Kim decided to support the development and dissemination of IR strains in Korea. As a result, Moon Hwae-ho's research, which had once been marginalized, entered a new and significant phase, ultimately reshaping the direction of South Korean rice production. During this transformative period, Kim In-hwan's support proved crucial for advancing IR strain research. His decision to back Moon Hwae-ho's work marked a turning point, shifting institutional resources and attention toward developing these promising varieties. The collaboration between Kim and Ho would later prove instrumental in revolutionizing Korean rice production through the development of Tongil rice.
The challenge of adapting IR strains to South Korea.
The IR strains brought by Moon Hwae-ho required further adaptation to Korea's climate. While IRRI's miracle rice had proven highly successful in tropical regions, its introduction to South Korea required significant adaptation as a response to several key challenges. First, climate and growing conditions. Korea's rice-growing regions experience significant seasonal variations, including cold winters and shorter growing seasons compared to Southeast Asia. IR strains, which were indica rice varieties suited to warm tropical climates, had to struggle to thrive under these conditions. Second, pest and disease resistance. Korean rice fields were home to different pests and diseases compared to those in Southeast Asia. IR strains needed to develop additional resistance to common Korean pathogens, requiring extensive crossbreeding efforts. Third, consumer preferences. Korean consumers preferred the sticky texture and taste of Japonica rice over the dry, long-grain characteristics of indica rice. Any successful adaptation of IR strains had to preserve the high yields of indica varieties while maintaining the desired eating qualities close to those of Japonica rice. Despite these challenges, Hamune continued his experiments with Iri-developed strains. Many failed, but after continued selection, one particularly promising line emerged, IR667. These adaptations and selective breeding efforts laid the groundwork for what would later become Tongil rice, representing a crucial bridge between Iri's tropical varieties and Korea's temperate agricultural needs. The persistence of researchers like Ho in overcoming initial skepticism proved essential for the eventual success of these adapted strains. Their careful selection process and attention to local growing conditions would ultimately transform Korean rice agriculture.
New team for developing IR strains.
Following Kim Il-hwan's decisive endorsement, the Rural Development Administration assembled a large-scale research team dedicated to the practical implementation of IR strains. The RDA's most skilled researchers focused their efforts on ensuring the successful commercialization of those new varieties. Once relegated to an unnoticed corner of the test fields, the IR strains were now cultivated in the best location with intensive care and attention. The team represented a significant shift in institutional priorities with dedicated researchers, specialized equipment, and expanded facilities all focused on developing IR-derived varieties suitable for Korean conditions. Regular progress reports and field demonstrations helped build momentum and confidence in the project. The concentrated effort of this new research team would prove crucial for the rapid development and refinement of what would eventually become Tongil rice. Similar to IR8's pioneering role at IRI, the research team's dedicated efforts marked a new chapter in Korean agricultural research. The concentrated institutional support and resources allocated to IR strain development signaled a clear shift in national priorities toward achieving rice self-sufficiency. This collaborative approach between researchers, administrators, and government officials would prove instrumental in transforming Korean agriculture.